Significant weather developing across northern Australia. Heavy rainfall, flooding concerns, tropical systems in play. That's what we're dealing with right now. Central Queensland has been absolutely hammered. Right now, across the Gladstone and Rockhampton coastline, you are still copping showers and thunderstorms. 79 millimetres overnight in Gladstone alone. The Calliope River is at moderate flooding. Up around Mount Carbine in far north Queensland, it poured during the night. 27 degrees at 9:30 this morning with 95% humidity. That S uncomfortable, and it's not easing up anytime soon. Meanwhile, across the southern states, conditions couldn't have been more different. Tasmania S enjoying lovely, dry, warm weather. South Australia S had a break in the wind, finally got some shade cloth up in Streaky Bay. Victoria S seeing cooler conditions with a bit of relief from the heat. But up north, it's a completely different story. I've examined the latest from the Bureau of Meteorology, cross-referenced with multiple forecast models, and looked at what is happening on the ground. What we are seeing develop over the next 2 weeks is worth paying close attention to, particularly if you are anywhere from central Queensland right up to Cape York Peninsula. Let's start with what is happening right now. The remnants of Ex-Tropical Cyclone Koji are currently sitting just east of Mount Isa, tracking northwest towards the Queensland Northern Territory border. This system has already caused significant flooding across northwestern Queensland, and there's a real possibility it redevelops into something more organised. Out in the Coral Sea, we've got tropical low 14U. The Bureau has declared this one as having a high chance of tropical cyclone development. The good news for Queensland is this system is tracking northeast, heading towards Vanuatu. It's expected to make a U-turn and head down towards New Caledonia, possibly developing into a tropical cyclone through the weekend. At this point, it poses no significant threat to Australian territories. Norfolk Island should be fine, and Queensland is definitely not in the firing line from this one. But here S, where it gets interesting. These systems are keeping the monsoon trough very active right across northern Australia. And that monsoon activity is what we need to talk about, because it S going to drive weather patterns for the next couple of weeks. Right now, the monsoon trough is firing up showers and thunderstorms across the northern Coral Sea and into Cape York Peninsula. That activity is drawing moisture down into central Queensland. The Rockhampton and Gladstone coastlines have been copping significant rainfall for days now. Showers and thunderstorms continue to develop through the afternoon and evening. More heavy falls are possible, and these areas are already saturated. Let me put the current flooding situation into perspective. Outside Blackwater, the Mackenzie River is in full flood. 24 hours ago, you could see the road clearly. Now, that road is sitting about 5 metres below the waterline. Trees that are 5 to 6 metres tall are being submerged. This does flood regularly, maybe a couple of times a decade to this magnitude, but this is significant. The water levels are still rising. There is going to be substantial damage to road infrastructure in that area. Just outside Emerald, the flooding is starting to ease slightly. The Central Highlands Road still has water over it, but it's reducing. 24 hours ago, there was much more water flowing through. It's getting close to being drivable, but police are still blocking it off. Up at Claremont, reports are coming through that rainfall records going back to 1916 have been broken. That S over a century of record keeping. For Barcaldine, you finally got 50 millimetres overnight. After watching the rest of Queensland cop flooding rains while you stayed dry, UV joined the party. But for areas like the Southern Downs, this reduction in rainfall is not good news. You are in drought conditions. You need this rain to continue, but unfortunately the focus is shifting away from your area. Here what is happening meteorologically. The remnants of Koji are drawing in moisture and maintaining shower and thunderstorm activity across the region. Over the next couple of days, we expecting activity to really pick up across northwestern Queensland. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we'll see an increase in shower and thunderstorm activity. By tomorrow night into Thursday and Friday morning, there's a real risk of heavy falls into northwestern Queensland. This does ease back slightly on Friday and Saturday, but then it returns again on Sunday as a low pressure system builds into the Gulf of Carpentaria. This is indirectly associated with the remnants of Koji. Some of that remnant energy persists in the atmosphere. Now, whether this develops into a tropical cyclone or just remains a tropical low is still uncertain. But either way, it's going to bring more rainfall to already saturated areas. By the weekend, and then out towards the 20th through to the 25th of January, we're re-looking at significant rainfall potential across parts of the northeast tropical coast of Queensland. This is shaping up to be that steady tropical rainfall we're familiar with at this time of year. January through to March typically brings those periods where we're talking about days of consecutive rainfall across northwestern Queensland. It doesn't necessarily rain continuously for days on end. Sometimes it does, but not always. What we typically see is less of that thundery downpour type stuff and more of those 3 to 6 hour rainfall accumulation events that happen every single day for days. They can drop 200 millimetres in a pop and you end up with 1,000 millimetres in the gauge by the time the week is done. Now, I'm not saying we're re-looking at anything quite that extreme at this point. It's still too early to make that call. But looking at the forecast models, weekly rainfall accumulations between Saturday the 17th through to Saturday the 24th of January are looking quite significant across northern Queensland. Keep in mind these numbers are generally underestimated, particularly at this time of year. The lower resolution forecast models typically do a terrible job at detecting how much rainfall is likely to come through for the northeast tropical coast. They don't handle the nature of monsoon rainfall well. Based on what we're seeing, if this monsoon trough really kicks up through northwestern Queensland, we're likely looking at falls between 200 to 500 millimetres there. For the northeast tropical coast, considering the monsoon trough will be a bit further away, we're re-looking at falls between 100 to 400 millimetres. That's a fair bit of rain on already saturated ground. Depending on how far south that monsoon trough sinks, we could see rainfall make it into the Townsville area or even down into the Central Coast and Whitsundays. That brings me to Brisbane. Right now, URE sitting under clouds with no rain. Clouds to the left, clouds to the right, stuck in the middle with no rainfall. That might change if this monsoon activity pushes further south than currently expected, but for now, you are in a relatively dry pocket. The Gold Coast saw just a few showers this morning with overcast skies. Murwillumbah up in the northern rivers of New South Wales, you are dealing with very humid conditions, 30 degrees plus with high humidity. A storm or at least a cool breeze would be welcome, but that is not coming in the immediate future. The humid air mass is persistent. Cape York Peninsula is seeing rain and more rain. That is going to continue. The monsoon trough is very active across that region and there's no sign of it weakening anytime soon. In terms of tropical cyclone development, there is a slim chance we see a tropical cyclone form in the Gulf of Carpentaria, directly associated with that low pressure system I mentioned earlier. There is also a slim to low chance in the Coral Sea that something gets itself going. The much higher chance is for a broad monsoon low, a bit like what Tropical Cyclone Koji originated from, but probably weaker and less broad. If this does develop, it will exacerbate rainfall chances across Cape York Peninsula, but it could also bring very heavy rainfall accumulations into the Townsville area or the Central Coast and Whitsundays if it kicks off. This is an aspect of the forecast we need to watch closely. I've looked at multiple forecast models, the European model, the GFS, the Access model. There's some disagreement on exactly where and when any tropical cyclone activity might develop. The GFS last night had a very strong tropical cyclone heading into the Townsville area. That S since been dropped from the forecast. The GFS is notoriously unreliable for long-range tropical forecasting. The Access model is calling for more broad and semi-organised tropical low potential. The ICON model doesn't go out far enough to be useful for this time frame. Realistically, between the 20th and 25th of January, we need to keep a close eye on both the Coral Sea and the Gulf of Carpentaria. Chances are nothing cyclonic develops. But we're definitely looking at increasing rainfall and shower activity and potentially some tropical lows that could bring flooding rainfall to either northwestern Queensland, northeastern Queensland, or worse, both. Here's the critical concern. These areas are saturated. Pretty much everywhere north of about Rockhampton is saturated from rainfall that come through in the last couple of weeks. Central Queensland, that pocket around Gladstone, Rockhampton, inland to Rolleston and Emerald, has had more than its fair share recently. These areas are saturated from rainfall in just the last couple of days. Massive rainfall accumulations. Any more rainfall in any of these areas is going to significantly increase the flooding risk. Using satellite imagery, you can still see flooding that has been left behind from the tropical low that came through on Boxing Day and Christmas. North of Cloncurry, the satellite is picking up water on the ground. It shows up as white streaks, looks a bit like veins or abstract art. That S water sitting on the surface. Cooler temperatures in the satellite data indicate water on the ground. You can see significant water flowing into the Diamantina Lakes area south of Boulia on the way to Birdsville. Through the Peru River area, south of Winton, heading down towards Quilpie, there is substantial water on the ground. This flooding is naturally a very big concern. It's going to take a lot less rainfall than usual to cause flooding in these areas. Normally, you might need 100 millimetres in 24 hours to see flooding. Right now, 50 millimetres could do it. The ground is full, rivers are high, catchments are saturated. There's nowhere for additional water to go except to spread out across the floodplains or run down already swollen rivers. For those of you in flood-prone areas, you know the drill, but it's worth going over the basics. If you haven't already, make sure you've got your emergency kit sorted. Clean drinking water, non-perishable food, battery-powered radio, torch, first aid kit. If you are on a property, check your livestock have access to high ground. Move equipment and machinery to elevated areas if possible. If the power goes out, fill the bathtub with clean water before the storm hits. Gives you drinking water and flushing water if the supply gets cut. Simple preparation that makes a real difference. For roads, if it's flooded, forget it. That's the SES slogan, and it exists for a reason. Never drive through floodwater. You can see what's under the surface. The road might be washed away. The current might be stronger than you think. It only takes 600 millimetres of fast-flowing water to float a car. Once you refloating, UV lost control. Keep an eye on the Bureau of Meteorology website for flood warnings. They categorise flooding as minor, moderate or major. If you in an area under a major flood warning, take it seriously. Have a plan for where you will go if you need to evacuate. For Wagga Wagga and the Riverina down in New South Wales, you are dealing with brutal heat right now. You need rain desperately. Unfortunately, this tropical activity is staying well north of you. The moisture isn't making it that far south. You are stuck waiting for a different weather pattern to bring relief. Victoria, you are seeing cooler conditions but not much rain. At least the cool change is welcome after recent heat. The southerly airflow is keeping temperatures down, but the rain-bearing systems are tracking too far north to benefit you. Western Australia, Perth and the southwest have had a cooler morning. A relief for the change, but at 1T last. The heat returns. That S the pattern you are dealing with. Brief cool changes followed by heat building again. The Indian Ocean dipole and broader atmospheric patterns aren't favouring sustained rainfall for your region right now. South Australia, conditions have been pleasant. 24 degrees and sunny in Adelaide. That's about as good as it gets. Enjoy it while it lasts. Tasmania, you are having a ripper. Lovely, dry, warm weather. Hobart's been comfortable. The southern winds that typically bring cold air haven't been as active. But winter will come soon enough. You'll see your share of cold, wind and rain over the coming months. New Zealand, particularly Christchurch, you are loving the sunshine and low humidity, but the garden needs rain. Same story across North Canterbury. You need precipitation, just hoping it comes without flooding in areas that have already had enough. The weather pattern developing across the Tasman Sea might bring some relief over the coming weeks, but right now you are in a dry spell. Looking ahead to around Australia Day, the 26th of January, there's potential for significant weather across northern Queensland. If that monsoon trough really sets up and a tropical low or cyclone develops, we could be looking at very heavy rainfall across the far north. This is still speculative at this point. The forecast models are showing various solutions and there's not good agreement yet, but the ingredients are there. Warm sea surface temperatures across the Coral Sea and Gulf of Carpentaria, an active monsoon trough, good upper level support, low wind shear. These are the conditions that favour tropical cyclone development. We in cyclone season, and this is exactly the type of pattern that can produce tropical systems. The question isn't whether we'll see tropical activity. We will. It's the monsoon season. The questions are where, when and how intense. Those are the unknowns we're reworking to narrow down. For those planning Australia Day activities across northern Queensland, keep an eye on the forecast. If you on the coast from Cairns down to Mackay, conditions could deteriorate significantly if a tropical system develops and tracks your way. If you are planning a barbecue, outdoor event or beach activities, have a backup plan. For those in northwestern Queensland, in the Gulf country, you're likely looking at persistent wet weather around Australia Day. Not necessarily a cyclone, but monsoon rainfall. That means daily showers and thunderstorms, periods of heavy rain and continued flooding concerns in low-lying areas. Many of you have lived through significant weather events. Cyclone Tracy, Christmas 1974, winds up to 217 kilometres per hour. Darwin was destroyed. Cyclone Yassi in 2011, a Category 5 system that tore through North Queensland. The 2011 Queensland floods that devastated Brisbane and Toowoomba. Black summer bushfires in 2019 and 20. You know what serious weather looks like. What we're re-looking at now isn't at that level. This isn't a catastrophic situation, but it is significant, particularly for areas already dealing with flooding. It deserves attention and preparation, not panic. The Bureau of Meteorology will continue to issue updates as this situation develops. Severe weather warnings and flood warnings will be issued as needed. Pay attention to those. They rebased on the latest data and analysis. Check on your mates, particularly if they were in remote areas or flood-prone regions. Elderly neighbours, people living alone, those on properties without easy access to town, make sure they're re-aware of what's coming and have what they need. For livestock, this persistent wet weather brings its own challenges. Cattle and sheep standing in wet conditions for days develop foot problems. Make sure stock have access to dry ground if possible. Check water troughs. In flood conditions, clean water can be hard to find even though there is water everywhere. If you on the roads in flood-affected areas, plan for delays. Many roads across central Queensland are still cut. The Bruce Highway has had sections affected. Alternative routes might add hours to your journey. If you don't need to travel through flood-affected areas, Dante. For aviation, Cairns and Townsville airports should continue operating, but there may be delays due to thunderstorm activity. If you're reflying to Port Vila tomorrow, Wednesday, keep an eye on tropical low 14U. It is tracking away from Australia towards Vanuatu, but it could bring deteriorating conditions to that region. The fire situation across Victoria and South Australia is separate from this northern weather pattern. There's been bushfire smoke across areas near the Victorian border. The Tholagolong fire, which mainstream media is calling the Walwa fire because they can pronounce the actual name, continues to burn. If you within 40 kilometres of the Victorian border in South Australia, you've been smelling smoke for days. The cool change moving through southern states will help fire conditions slightly, but vigilance is still needed. Fire danger ratings remain elevated across parts of Victoria and South Australia. Check the Rural Fire Service and Country Fire Authority websites for current conditions. There is a lot happening across Australia right now. Northern tropics are active and wet. Southern states are dealing with fire weather and temperature fluctuations. Western Australia is dry. It's a mixed bag, typical for this time of year, but more active than usual. The key takeaway is this. If you in northern Queensland, from central Queensland right up to Cape York and across to the Gulf country, you are in for a wet period. Heavy rainfall is coming. Flooding is a real concern in already saturated areas. There is potential for tropical cyclone development, though that's not certain yet. Stay informed, check the Bureau of Meteorology regularly, pay attention to warnings, have your emergency plans ready, look after your mates and neighbours. For everyone else across the country, your weather is separate from this northern activity. You've got your own conditions to deal with, whether that's heat, fire weather, or just waiting for rain that isn't coming. This situation will continue to evolve over the next 2 weeks. As we get closer to Australia Day and beyond, we'll have better clarity on whether any tropical cyclones develop and where they might track. For now, it's a watching brief with preparation for those in potentially affected areas. I'll be monitoring this closely and providing updates as the situation develops. The forecast models will be rerun multiple times over the coming days. Each run will give us more information and hopefully better agreement on what's coming. Weather forecasting in the tropics is challenging. These monsoon patterns can be unpredictable. A slight shift in the position of the monsoon trough can mean the difference between heavy rain and mist showers. A small change in wind shear can determine whether a tropical low becomes a cyclone or just dissipates. That's why we don't just rely on one model. We look at multiple models, compare their solutions, and assess the overall pattern. When the models agree, we have higher confidence. When they disagree, like they are now for the late January period, we acknowledge the uncertainty and keep monitoring. The European model, Access model, and GFS are all showing tropical activity, but they differ on the specifics. That tells us something is likely to happen, but the details are still uncertain. As we get closer to the event, the models will converge on a solution and we'll have better information to work with. For now, if you are in northern Queensland, treat this as a developing situation that requires attention. Make your preparations, stay informed. Don't panic, but don't ignore it either. The wet season brings this type of weather every year. Some years are more active than others. This year is shaping up to be active. That is not surprising given the broader climate patterns. But active doesn't necessarily mean catastrophic. It means we need to pay attention and be prepared. That's the situation as it stands. Significant tropical activity developing across northern Australia, heavy rainfall continuing across already saturated areas, potential for tropical cyclone development in the latter part of January, flooding concerns across northwestern and northeastern Queensland. Stay safe out there, look after each other, and keep an eye on the forecasts as this situation continues to